Hello there. I'm joined today by the amazing Scott Johnson. He has a YouTube channel as well. We're here today to talk about collecting the expanded universe and some of the different, facets and aspects to collecting that make collecting the EU perhaps challenging or rewarding or fun, and sort of the different aspects of the EU that can be collected that you might not have thought of, like posters, for example. Christopher Nelson, of course, if you've checked his channel out, shows lots of amazing promos and promotions. And Scott also has some posters that we'll be showing as the course of this video unfolds. So,
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Brennan. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss this. Star Wars EU collecting as a whole isn't something that's widely covered on any YouTube channel, as far as I'm
yeah,
aware. I mean, there's specific collecting groups about certain genres, whether they do
yeah,
the miniatures, the card games. I know Christopher Nelson has done, promos, poster videos, but EU collecting as a whole, just besides the comics and the books, which I'm sure we'll discuss as well, but as a broad genre, I think isn't really discussed enough, and I'm glad we can take the opportunity to talk about it.
and you can get pretty in depth. Like when I discovered the expanded universe, I, I was introduced to it by books, and then I found out there were comics. And I was like, my mind was first of all blown by that because I was like, now I have to get all these comics as well. And then I discovered Matt Wilkins, who's out here talking about picture books as well, and that takes it another level. And then you have video games, and video games for different consoles. And then I don't know a lot about it, but then there's card games as well, which are kind of related to like RPG stuff. Um, Kind of springing off of that. Would you say that's to be the case?
That's where they started out from, right? From 1995, you had Magic the Gathering, and the whole card game craze started
Yeah.
off. And Star Wars was actually a big part of that when Decipher had the licensing agreement to make Star Wars cards. Now Star Wars cards had been made by Topps prior to then, but there was no game associated with it. So when the card game craze took off in 1995, it was really based off the RPGs. And I've heard it described really as a D8 RPG, right? Because the mechanics of the game, you don't need any dice, any damage counters or anything like that. Your deck served as a randomizer, and the cards all had a randomizer value between 0 and 7. So it was really like rolling a d6 in the West End Games RPGs,
Right.
and it's different from a lot of more modern card games now, I would say, because you actually had a board that represented, the real galaxy, real locations, and you had characters that would deploy to those locations and move around the board, and they fight enemies. They could train to be a Jedi. They could be carbon frozen. They could take bounties. They could moisture farm. There was a whole bunch of possibilities they could do, and it really took off based on the idea of playing an RPG.
And there's miniatures, right? Little figurines. Do those play into the card games? Because I've seen lots of, expanded universe. I think it's Wizards of the Coast. Like miniature figurines, are those associated with the cards in any ways, or are those their own separate kind of game?
Well, yes and no. So the miniatures started out actually under West End Games. They had the license to create miniatures as well. You don't really see many of them now because they came unpainted and you had to paint them yourself. And there wasn't too many. There was like a pack of stormtroopers, a pack of aliens, a pack of rebels, and they had, they battled like any other miniature game. But it didn't really. I think there were a couple adventure modules that West End Games had that were booklets that were associated where you could play with the miniatures alongside of it as part of the one full adventure. But there weren't too many. Most of them were RPGs that you'd play in real time with yourself as the character. When Wizards of the Coast got the license, that they did a lot more with the miniatures, right? they had those plastic like little booster packs. I remember they were like $20. They came around maybe early 2000s, and they had a lot of expanded universe expansions. They had a lot of the Jedi. They had the Yuuzhan Vong. They had TCW. They
Legacy
had
too, right?
Legacy. They had the Force Unleashed, Old Republic. I have a handful of those. But really, where it became associated with the trading card game is under WizKids. They actually made a miniature game. I believe they were an independent company. They were called WizKids because the founder of the company had previously worked under Wizards of the Coast. That's where you get the name WizKids. But I have actually one of them here. But this is like the Outrider here. So they had miniatures that you'd snap out. They were like polystyrene, the same material as maybe your credit card would be. And you'd actually build a ship, a vehicle, something like that. And you'd battle your opponent. And there was a card game associated with it. So I have some here. This is the pocket model game. And this is a booster pack. And if you open that, it comes with like a couple of models like this AT-AT you can see.
Yeah.
Focuses. But there's also some cards that play along with it that give it an extra element of randomization, extra element of strategy. So those were cool. They had, original trilogy versions. They had Clone Wars, of course, and I think they got as far as the Force Unleashed before they lost the license. They went under around the 2008-2009 financial crisis. They had to go into like a reorganization, bankruptcy, or something like that.
So, how much like new lore would you say stuff like that adds? Like sentences on the cards that expand a little bit or add little things here and there, and is there any inconsistencies that you've noticed in like these sort of cards?
I mean, they don't really add too much lore except for the beginning Decipher games, right? Mm-hmm. The Decipher game was special because it came out in 1995 as the expanded universe was getting developed, right? You didn't have that many books going on back then. And they built on some of the same lore as you would find under West End Games. The designer of the games actually read that stack of RPG books that were sent out to the writers of the novels, right? They read that same material. So if you look at the lore of those cards from the Decipher games, particularly not the episode 1 stuff so much, but like from 1995 to 2001, a lot of that incorporates EU. I did a series of articles on the expandeduniverse.com of how certain cards to take note of, and also the fact that that game specifically is responsible for naming certain characters in the expanded universe, like Janus Grijatis, the Emperor's advisor, a lot of the behind-the-scenes aliens in the Cantina, in Jabba's palace, things of that nature. Characters that didn't really have a name in the behind-the-scenes stills in the film. This was given that game gave them expanded universe names, which are still used to this day, and actually a lot of them were, funny enough, carried over to the new canon as well.
Some of those cards, I think I recall seeing cards that depicted aliens from the holiday special too.
Yes,
characters from there as well were carried over. Like that there was one that was a Rhodian Greedo species, right? And it was not expressly stated that it was Greedo in the movie, right? And I think the cards gave it a different name, if I'm remembering correctly.
The two I know that were from the holiday special were from the Tatooine expansion. And by that point, the game was going in a direction where they looked specifically toward the expanded universe for inspiration, right? The expanded universe, by the time 2001 came along, I mean, you were in the New Jedi Order, right? There was a lot of lore to use, and they had already covered expansions from the original movies, and they had a couple of episode 1 sets as well. So from that point on, they looked to things like Shadows of the Empire, of course, a classic, EU novel. And the X-Wing series, you had cards for like Mirax Tarek, Corran Horn, and they looked to the holiday special for I think it was a Ithorian, if I remember right, and a Jawa. I could be wrong, but there were two from the Tatooine expansion that were straight out of the holiday special. So
That's really cool.
yeah.
That's one thing I love about the EU is even though universally the holiday special is ridiculed, the expanded universe embraced it and pulled elements from it, which I think was cool. Even the cards pulled from it, which is just really really cool. And so beyond cards, you can even get into like promotional material as well. Like Christopher Nelson is big with like posters and stuff, and I know you've been starting to get some of those posters as well, like stuff that you'd find at like a Barnes and Noble or something like that, like a bookstore kind of stuff, advertising the books, right?
Yeah, well, there's been a variety of posters over the years. Some of them are promo type posters, meant to promote the latest books. I did a video on the displays, the store displays, which actually weren't posters, but they were, cardboard toppers that were meant to be on the top of book displays, a self-standing book display, that would showcase the latest expanded universe book release. Like here's one of them. This is a double-sided poster. I don't know if I can show it too well on this webcam, but this is Death Troopers. Pretty good sized poster.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the just has Star Wars there in the corner. No other writing. And then on the back,
Fate of the Jedi. Yeah.
Fate of the Jedi. You got Luke, Leia, Vistari. So it's a pretty good sized poster.
Yeah.
But really cool. Like you can find some of the stuff. There's a promo thing in the corner. Read the exciting new series, Fate of the Jedi. So stuff like that's really cool.
Super cool. I brought out the only two posters I have. These were folded into the Tales from the Clone Wars graphic novel that was given out at Celebration 5 that collected some of, I think it was Pablo Hidalgo's web strips that were released on StarWars.com that he would release weekly, and they would like tie into the newest TCW episode that would come out. And so they put these two posters folded into the back. Those are the only two posters I have so far, but it's really cool that they went that extra mile to include posters with the graphic novel there.
Yeah, and as far as I know, that was a Dark Horse exclusive that was only released at San Diego Comic-Con 2010, if I remember right. I don't know if there was a celebration that year or not, but after that, Dreams and Visions Press, which was, I guess, the publisher. I guess Dark Horse was the publisher, but Dreams and Visions Press, who maybe did the printing or something along that lines, they had a stack of extras that they sold online
on the website.
On the website for years and years. So they slowly trickled out, amongst anybody who knew about it, anybody who wanted a copy. They could get the actual trade paperback along with those posters. And some of them were signed as well. Like when I bought mine, I have some signed and then I have some that aren't signed.
Who signed it?
I think
was it Hidalgo?
I don't know. I couldn't make out the signature, but I think it was the artist, whoever did the artwork for the comic. Yeah, it might be Pablo. It might be Pablo.
I mean, yeah. Well, so when collecting the expanded universe, I think it's a little bit overwhelming because it'll take you years to get all the books and comics first of all before you can even start to dip your toes into some of the video games and source books and toys. Like there's action figures that are EU. There's cards. There's posters. There's just an overwhelming amount, and it's just kind of intimidating, I think, to start to try to accumulate all of this extra EU stuff.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you get into the expanded universe. Sorry to interrupt, but when you get into the expanded universe, especially if you're a new fan, it can be pretty intimidating for sure. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I was just gonna ask if you agreed with that. And um, one thing regarding that is, where would you like start for getting into cards? Because I know pretty much nothing about all of the cards. Like, what cards as an EU fan would you be looking at to like want to get it? Because there's numerous series, numerous packs, right? And what would be the most interesting to an expanded universe fan who's been reading through the books and comics and video games that they could kind of dive into getting back into cards?
I would guess it, like anything else, it would be based upon your age range, right? How old you were when certain things came out. What do you think of the prequels, right?
Yeah.
That would taint your decision making a lot. I tend to like the Decipher Star Wars CCG because that's what I remember from the convention that I attended when I was a kid. Right? They showed me how to play the game. It was like a joint Star Wars, Star Trek convention. Um, that was, I think, shortly before Episode One came out. So maybe late '98, early '99, something like that. Ann Crispin was supposed to attend that, by the way.
Mm,
Unfortunately, I
wow.
tried to get her autograph, but they said she was sick and didn't attend. It
Right.
wasn't related to her illness that she had, recently, but I guess it was a minor flu or something. But yeah, I have great memories of that specific convention because they had a tournament going on with the Star Wars CCG, and it was in full swing. But they were also teaching, younger players, new players about the game, and that was like all the rage. That was like half the activity at the convention. I mean, they were selling some stuff. They had some other guests there, but it seemed to me like I spent most of my time in that game room learning the
Mhm.
game. Um, and I just have other memories like from the Decipher era and like the Bantam era. Um, I remember displays in my local library, right, where they had all the Star Wars paperback books together. They had a display that might have been one of those old, Decipher store displays that I saw a while back, but it didn't have a topper. What it did, it had a plain background, but someone who was a fan of the cards actually taped a whole bunch of like Jabba's Palace expansion cards to that book display, right? And as I was reading through the Bantam era, I got a lot of my books from the library, but I remember that display very distinctly, and I always associated it with that game. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess it depends what you like. If you're a more modern fan, if you're a Clone Wars TCG fan, you could get something like this, Clone Wars Adventure by
Does
Topps.
that
Uh,
does that tie into the Clone Wars Adventures MMO game?
Yes, it's
No.
based on that MMO game. There was a period of time, like during the Star Wars Galaxies MMO, there was actually an
Yeah.
online trading card for that, which was more expanded universe focused. Unfortunately, they never made actual cards for that.
I,
Um,
I was about to ask you about that. So you couldn't ever get physical cards for that. Like there's a character named like Namin Cha or Cho who was like only on those like digital card packs. What was that like? Was that like you you like pay and they did give you digitalized cards that you could use in a game?
I guess it was part of the online money making scheme that they had going on there. But there was a lot of expanded universe material, and they were able to make expansions a lot quicker than they would
Mm,
have been printing the actual cards. It was a bummer
right.
they didn't print the actual cards. I'm not a big fan in general of the online exclusive card game only. Some people like
Yeah.
that. It's not for me. I like the physical version. But yeah, the Clone Wars, they did a MMO. I guess it was some like online world that you had the Clone Wars and you had a bunch of mini games and all that. One of the mini games was Card Commander, and since Tops is a weird situation because they have the trading card license, but at the time this came out around 2010 2011, I'd say. I don't know exactly who had the gaming license. I think they were
Hmm.
still making the LCG. So Fantasy Flight might have had the trading card game license, but for whatever reason, Tops was allowed to make this. And you can still find sealed product of this. This is super cheap. You can get hollow versions of all the Clone Wars characters if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but I'm just letting people know what's out there. If
Yeah.
you're a big Episode 1 fan, may I suggest Young Jedi, right? So this isn't as complicated as the Decipher game is, the Star Wars CCG. This is also made by Decipher, but it's more made for kids. That's why it's called Young Jedi, and
Right.
it's pretty much focused on Episode 1. There's 3 planets. There's Naboo. There's Tatooine. There's Coruscant, and it's sort of a rock paper scissors version of the game. The cards have different values, different special abilities in that, but a lot of cool hollows in that. I think you can get this super cheap as well. Maybe not sealed product, but you could get tons of cards for that.
And is that original art to those cards, or are they like screenshots from the movies?
Some of them are.
Some of both.
Some of them are screenshots from the movies. Some are just stills of certain actors, actresses, things that may not be in the movie proper, but were on the scene when it was filmed. They,
Right.
take a picture of this character.
That's really cool. With the I wanted to ask about the digitalized online cards again. Could someone print those out? Do you know if anyone has like created physical cards of those like Galaxies online trading cards?
Not that I know of, and looking into it, I wasn't really involved in that game. I played Star Wars Galaxies. I played the trial version, but I wasn't really involved with that other than, for a couple weeks really. And I had trouble just tracking down the complete set of all the cards. I don't know if that exists. Maybe it does. But it's, yeah, I mean, that would be great to print out your own versions of the cards. I've never seen it done, but I'm not saying it can't be done, because people print their own cards all the time. The Decipher Star Wars Player Committee, they print their own cards, and they even create their own booster packs and give them as prize support during tournaments. So it's doable. I just don't know if anyone kept the database of all the cards. It's similar to like the whole hyperspace fan club, where you had all those Zim the Despot stories that some people kept, and then but you don't know if you have the complete version of everything. It's one of those things that's kind of been lost to time, unfortunately.
For sure. And stuff like the short stories on StarWars.com and stuff can be fine with like the Wayback Machine, but then when you get to hyperspace stuff, obviously it was behind a paywall, and you can't pay for that subscription anymore to hyperspace. So screenshots and downloaded files is really all we have, and luckily some people hung on to those so that you can find some of that stuff. But with digitalized cards, with Galaxies folding, like it's hard to think that many people would have the foresight to keep that.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like, there's expanded universe stories that are out there. There's material out there, and it's just so frustrating to not have that, or even if you do find it, it's only in bits and pieces. And you mentioned hyperspace. I mean, I was trying to think back in like 2008. I was in college back then, and it was expensive, like to get a membership. I mean, you had a membership for the year. I had subscribed to like Star Wars Insider, maybe in middle school and ninth grade, something like that. But my parents paid for the subscription, right? So it was easy, when someone else is paying for it. But then when you get to college and you're kind of strapped for cash, unfortunately, I didn't know the expanded universe would be gone. I didn't have the foresight to create a database there, and $40 was a lot. It wasn't cheap for a year, especially because by that point there wasn't a lot of exclusive fiction that the Star Wars Insider had, and that's really what I bought it for. Right? If there was a short story or something, I'd go pick up that specific issue, and everything else, I'd let it go. I could read those articles online or somewhere else.
Yeah. The Insider stuff, it's really hard for collecting because, You know, if you're OCD like I am, you'd want to have the full run, but then at the same time, not all of them had short stories. Like you said, some would have articles, I guess, with EU relevant information. Like some of them had like Rogues Gallery articles where it would explain the names and a little bit of background of, background characters in the movies and stuff like that. So there was some like EU relevance with new lore and like almost all the insiders, but the stuff with the actual short stories with the short fiction, was spaced out over certain issues. So like, are you gonna take the time and effort to track down every single issue in that series, or are you just gonna try to pick off the ones that actually had short stories in them? It's difficult, complicated.
Yeah, and the other thing with Star Wars Insider is I didn't. I don't know about other people, but I didn't view those magazines as something that would be collectible. Like I didn't keep them in the sleeves. I'd throw them in my backpack. I'd go to school. I'd pass them around during recess or during a lunch break or whatever, and I never kept those. Like those completely got destroyed, and I've since bought some of them since then, for my own personal collection. But as far as like the short stories, if you want the short stories, you can get digital versions elsewhere. There's some things like you mentioned the Rogues Gallery that tell you a little bit about the background characters. There's who's who of like the Grand Admirals and some other things like that with some pertinent artwork that you may want the original versions for. But you can find those on the secondary marketplaces like eBay, Mercari, like those are available because the print run on those were just tremendous. So somebody still has them, even though I personally I didn't keep them, but someone older than me at the time probably did.
And there's other magazines as well, like Galaxy magazine. I was lucky enough to get all of those issues. Those are fantastic. Lots of EU stuff in there. There's short stories, RPG stories. There's interviews with people who were writing the comics and books at the time. There's some really fantastic stuff there, and they were really involved with the Topps card game at the time too, right?
Yes, Topps had the license. So Star Wars Galaxy, I remember this issue specifically because it had I think almost all of them that had posters in the back.
Yeah.
But the one for this one was specifically about the Jedi. And as I was reading the EU, I think I read Kevin J. Anderson's trilogy first, and the Tales of the Jedi comic series after that. I got all the trade paperbacks, I think, one year for Christmas. This tied everything together, like the whole Eula drama, Exar Kun, Dorsk 81, Dorsk 82, like that Jedi issue. I mean, sealed the deal as far as like a cohesive continuity. I mean, I couldn't want anything more than that. But yeah, Topps had the license for that. So there's a couple of short stories in here actually too. Not in all of them, but it's some of them.
In that issue, there's a short story called Jedi Protector about a Jedi Protector on a random world in the Tales of the Jedi era. There's something with Lumia, which is very interesting.
Right.
Because obviously, at that time in the EU, if I'm not mistaken, those comics were kind of viewed as secondary canon. So that story was pretty huge in introducing Lumia back. I think, can't remember the exact title of that story, but she's fighting a battle on a ship.
Yeah, Dark Star of Empire, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And then it also tied into the West End Games stuff because there's a story with the Inquisitor Tremaine in there too. So those Galaxy magazines were really excellent. And I think a couple of my copies came with cards in them, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, my copies were missing some of the posters and stuff that they originally might have had. But in addition to like Galaxy magazine and Insider, there's also like Gamer magazine to account for. There's Star Wars Kids magazine around episode 1 that I think had some comics in it. Like there's lots of magazines to account for. Like not, you think of books, comics, video games, picture books, source books, and then there's all these magazines to account for too that have EU articles and short stories. It's really crazy.
Yeah, Polyhedron a lot of the gaming magazines. This one, like Challenge Magazine, has a short story.
Yeah.
Has a plague story, very similar to Death Troopers, by the way. Um, it's a short RPG adventure. There isn't much in a lot of them, but they're worth picking up, in my opinion. You can find digital versions for some of them, but I like to collect the original ones. They're not too expensive, maybe $10-15 here and there. But the Challenge Magazine, Polyhedron, pretty much all
Inquest.
Inquest.
Yeah.
Inquest was specifically a card game magazine, and that has some articles on the Decipher game as well. But going back to tops really quickly, like the Star Wars Galaxy trading cards, that's not going to focus, but they made trading cards over the years, really since the expanded universe took off. The early Star Wars Galaxy series 1, series 2, series 3, those are really focused on the expanded universe because that time period that they came out, the expanded universe was really developing. And they actually still make Star Wars Galaxy trading cards to this day, but they're mostly new canon, relate to the new shows and that. But if you go back into the 90s, like series 2 and 3, especially, if you look at my my picture on YouTube, it's Admiral Akbar in winter.
Yeah.
Like that artwork comes from the Star Wars Galaxy trading cards.
It's really cool that a lot of the cards had, exclusive art to it. I know there's some art of like Jason Solo from that run with like some of his pets from like Young Jedi Knights. So there's like a cohesive narrative even with the cards in that time based on what I've seen from them. And after Galaxy Magazine stopped, I think it became more focused on collecting cards because didn't it go to Galaxy Collector? Or there was like a magazine that took over after Galaxy Magazine's issue run, right?
Yeah. I think I don't have the Galaxy Collector one, but I remember flipping through it, and it was, if I remember right, it was focused mainly on the action figures, right?
Oh, okay.
Because the Kenner run, I think they were making like Shadows of the Empire specific action figures around that time, and also the Dark Empire. They had like Mara Jade, they had the Clone Emperor, Kyle Katarn, some of those iconic expanded universe characters. Unfortunately, they printed those to death, and those aren't really real collectible items now because of the print run. But they're still those are still around too. And speaking of action figures, let me grab this one. I don't know how many people remember these, but Micro Machines. They had miniature. These are really cool because they look like the books.
Like the books,
right?
So, cool.
So I remember getting these at Toys R Us, and they had 3 of them. They had Jedi Search, they had Truce of Pakora, and Heir to the Empire. And if you went, they had if you look on eBay, they had a much smaller run of Dark Apprentice. They did Courtship of Princess Leia, and they did Dark Force Rising, but it was in a very small print run. You could still find them, but they're like hundreds of dollars to get those sealed. Wow. And I always looked for those. And I always thought to myself, like, if they rounded out the trilogy, if they made Champions of the Force, if they made Last Command, what would be the third one-shot novel? Would it be The Crystal Star? Would it be Children of the Jedi? I always like wondered what that would have been. So
maybe Crystal Star with a little Waru thing.
Yeah. I mean, great opportunity for a Waru action figure.
Yeah.
I mean, a missed opportunity. The Black Series has to do that. Waru has to be the next action figure.
The next GameStop exclusive will be Waru for their line of expanded universe action figures.
I will be first in line to buy said action figure.
Yeah, and speaking of the Crystal Star, that reminded me of something that Christopher Nelson covered on his channel in regards to like deep collecting, because there's a misprint to where Crystal Star was printed with a different book in its interior, and then the other book, it was a fantasy book, I think, had Crystal Star within that book. So they'd clearly gotten mixed up. So I don't know how hard those are to find at present, but like that's another thing that you can consider, those like misprints of EU novels there.
That's definitely a misprint. I've never seen a misprint to that degree, right? And the book that it got switched around with was Witchfire by I think it was James Clemens, and
Okay.
that's one of the things I'm still on the lookout for. I've pretty much rounded out my EU collection. I mean, I still find interesting things here and there that I buy, but yeah, that's one wherever I'm at a bookstore and it looks like they have a large paperback collection. I definitely look for Witchfire with Crystal Star inside, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You don't see the Crystal Star that often as a paperback book in stores. At least
No.
I haven't.
I don't know who discovered that or how, but Christopher Nelson instantly snapped up copies um, that he was able to find, which is really really cool. Like like you said, like a misprint to that degree where it's literally they mixed up the entire manuscript being printed in the wrong. Like, look, it's just an insane level of incompetence that has resulted in something that's pretty valuable now to collectors.
I mean, I didn't see a lot of videos of that at the time. I know Matthew Wilson, who has a channel Geek Addict, he
Yeah,
covered it, and he bought like tons and tons of copies trying to get it. And I think he finally
yeah,
got it, but it took him a long time. He has tons of extra copies of the Crystal Star. But I think Christopher Nelson was the only one to buy Witchfire to see if it had the Crystal Star inside. And that was an absolute genius move because I think he got it first time.
yeah,
And I thought it was kind of weird at the time. I was like, why would
yeah,
you want so many extra copies of the Crystal Star? But I totally regret not buying it now.
yeah,
It was at an odd time where I was kind of strapped for cash, and I'm like, I'm not going to waste money on Crystal Star copies. Like, what's going on? But I totally
yeah,
regret not doing that now because that's very hard to find, and it's so hilarious on the Amazon reviews of people who have bought Witchfire. It's like
yeah,
I bought this book and there's a Star Wars book inside of it and it's terrible. Like I'm so upset. I want to return this.
yeah,
I wish I could reach out to these people and say, hey, I want it. I'll pay you 10 times the price of whatever you bought it for.
yeah.
You know, it's just it's so funny. It's like they don't realize that a lot of this stuff went in the trash, right?
Right.
After they got
Yeah.
it, but I thought I think Lucasfilm, someone from Lucasfilm on Twitter actually went out and said, "This is not a collector's item. Like, stop enjoying this. Stop being happy about it." You know,
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
it was such a funny situation. But yes, I would definitely be in the market for more specifically Witchfire with the Crystal Star inside if I had
Yeah.
my choice. But I definitely like both.
That's the one I would definitely go for as well. And when collecting with different covers of stuff like that, you have to account for with books now, like the Legends banner. And there's some people I know who actually really like the Legends banner on their books, and they think it gives it a unity to their shelves. How the Legends banner kind of stretches across all the spines. Now, I would prefer to have the original copies, um, but again, the as the Essential Legends collection are starting to come out, my mind is going to, will the Legends banner copies start to maybe be phased out, like eventually long term, once they start to build up more Essential Legends collections? Like, will they keeping those in print? And some of them are already pretty hard to find, and
Mm-hmm.
not every EU novel has a Legends mass market paperback reprint yet. Like MedStar, one of the MedStar books has not been reprinted with the Legends banner. I don't think Knight Errant has been, or the last two Coruscant Knights books. So that's another thing to consider, because to me, I would, since I have some Legends banner paperbacks and some non-Legends banner paperbacks, the OCD in me wants me to have either one set or both complete sets. Like it's just it's going to cost me a lot of money, but I almost want to get all of them with the Legends banner and all without, to have the full sets. And then with the Essential Legends collection, that's another thing to consider, right? Because they're starting to print through those different size, new cover art, right?
Yeah.
Even though some of that is inaccurate to the lore, with Thrawn having pupils on the Essential Legends cover art. But That's another thing to consider with collecting, like for the expanded universe. How much do you consider all of the reprints that they're doing?
Well, you just brought up a slew of topics, and I have a lot of thoughts on the Essential Legends collection. But as far as the Legends banner, because I think that's what you brought up first. Um, well, with the Legends banner, I mean everything that they're going to be reprinting going forward is going to have the Legends banner. That I forget. Do the Essential Legends collections actually have the banner on them as well, or they just say
They have
Essential
the
Legends?
banner. They have the banner on the the Essential Legends collections. They do not have the Legends banner.
Okay,
Um,
so
and then in the comic world, the Epic collections have the Legends banner, but it doesn't stretch around to the spine, which
right.
I always thought was kind of interesting.
Right, and even some of the single issues, like the old Marvel, I think they called them True Believers in the lead up to Marvel 108. Those all had the Legends banner as well. Even stuff like Tag and Bink, when they reprinted those, they had the
With
Legends banner. So
a clearly non-canon Infinity story, they were just like, it's Legends.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
you have to kind of understand what Legends means. Legends is not expanded universe. You know,
yeah,
they're not equatable, right? So
yeah.
the Legends includes everything, even things that were like in canon. So
Infinities. Yeah,
if they ever reprinted for say for example the was it Star Wars Infinities, like you
yeah,
said, the trade paperbacks as one omnibus, right, or one epic
yeah.
collection, that would still have Star Wars the Legends banner on it. But there's some things that I think I think did us a lot of benefit that they reprinted, like for things like the Ewoks annuals. They made a
Mm,
hardcover. It was originally listed for $75. I think it came out in 2015 or so.
yeah,
But they printed it so much they had trouble selling it. They had trouble selling a lot of their trade paperback, like uh, large comics in general. They had uh, a lot of trouble selling those. So they eventually went on sale, and I scooped up mine for like $25. Um, and I think it had a remainder mark or something, but I got both Ewoks annuals and the whole run of the Ewoks comics. So I mean that was an amazing deal, and
and
I you know
the droids comic was in there too, right? As well.
well there is one with Ewoks and droids, but
Yeah.
that's I don't think that's a hardcover. I think
Okay.
that's a soft cover. One of the what do they call it, epic collections.
Yeah.
This one they called an omnibus because it was a hardcover. It was super
Right.
thick. I have it up there, but I'm not going to try to take it down. But yeah, I was really happy to get that. And the epic collections in general, I like that they have the Tales, the Tales comics interspersed in where
Yeah.
they think they take place, particularly like with the first one, where they had Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand, right? They had Shadows of
Yeah.
the Empire, but they also had the Timothy Zahn, I think it was Michael Stackpole too. They did a short comic in Star Wars Tales #1 called Mara Jade Night on the Town,
Yeah.
and that slit perfectly into where it should be in like
Yeah.
the Shadows of the Empire, the Marjade by the Emperor's Hand had Night on the Town and had I think Shadows of the Empire Evolution or something like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely picked up that epic collection because at the time they went on sale because they overprinted these things.
Yeah.
So it was a great opportunity, particularly early on 2015, 2016, to get the comics. And I mean, still today, uh, when they first come out, things like Dark Empire with the end notes. I mean,
Yeah.
that you have to pick that stuff up, right? Because it's only going to go up in price. And yes, they
Yeah.
might eventually print it in that hardcover, what they call an omnibus format. But you don't know, right? Anything can happen.
Yeah.
So I personally picked up a lot of that stuff, even though I already had copies already. So I just
It
like the formats it's in and putting things in order.
and what's interesting to me about that is I prefer the size of like Dark Horse trade paperbacks, like for reading. So like I like to get those Dark Horse trade paperbacks. I like the Dark Horse omnibuses that they did, but they were really small. So like the pages were really small. They like condensed everything to a smaller size. So that was tricky. So but the Essential Legends are just undeniably so great because, like you said, they slot the Tales stories into order, which is just fantastic. Instead of getting those like Tales trade paperbacks that they made that are just stories from all eras, just mixed in together, you can get them like in their chronological timeline, and it even tells us stuff that we didn't know. For example, the Legacy Volume 4 Epic Collection had not only issues 1 to 18 of the Legacy 2 series with Anya Solo, it also included Tales the Storyteller, which was the issue where C3PO got destroyed by these futuristic insectoid people, and they put that after Tales. They put that after Legacy 2 issue number 18, saying that that did happen after that. And they
Yeah.
put in the fourth precept from the Visionaries comic, and they put it at the end of the timeline. Like, to me, that's just an insane amount of detail. The people putting these together clearly care. Like,
Yeah.
they're trying to get money, but at the same time, they're putting a lot of detail in. Like that the fourth precept is like a 4-page little comic in the Visionaries graphic novel that they put out, and they specifically took that out and put it where it would go in the timeline. Like, there's a lot of thought going into it.
There certainly is. And although I don't think they did a perfect job, I think there's some areas where they made certain mistakes. Somebody who's ever in charge of that project, as far as deciding what to print and what Epic Collection to put that story
Yeah.
into, definitely knows what they're doing. So
Yeah.
who's ever doing that, I hope they they get a promotion. I hope they
Yeah.
just eventually decide to continue the expanded universe, because they are definitely fans for sure. And I like the Epic collections. I mean, I know some people get turned off by buying Disney things, but
Yeah.
to make it accessible to people that maybe couldn't get the omnibuses, because some of the early omnibuses that came out, pre 2010, those weren't printed in drastically high numbers. Some of them were
Yeah.
kind of hard to get. I mean, you can find beat up versions, but
Yeah.
it's definitely time for a new Tales of the Jedi printing, right? So
Yeah.
to have that stuff accessible to new fans, I think is super spectacular. Going back a little bit to what you said about the Essential Legends collection, right? The fact that those stories, now I don't know how many of those they plan to print,
Mm.
but the real benefit to us as EU fans is the fact that they're in big box stores, right?
Yeah.
They're in your Targets, they're in your Walmarts. They're not
Yeah.
just in places like Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. They're available to people who are just browsing the store saying, hey, I like Star Wars. I'm going to pick up this Star Wars book. That's how you get new fans.
Yeah.
So if that causes them to become expanded universe fans, to check out everything that's been printed since 1978, it doesn't matter if they read all the books, doesn't matter if they read all the comics. If they just look into that, if they enjoy the story, they're new expanded universe fans. That continues the legacy. That's great for us, in my opinion. So you can say what you want about the artwork. You can say what you want about what was it? The rule of two had a zero instead of an O. Minor things like that. The acknowledgments got shortened, I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, those are minor things. You can nitpick all you want, but I think you have to look at the bigger picture and recognize a win when we have it, right? So
And
that's the
it's
way.
gonna be a big win when we get that Crystal Star reprint where the cover is just Waru.
Oh
That's
yes,
gonna be the biggest win of all.
yes, for sure.
Because the Crystal Star is Essential Legends for sure. So if they don't,
I think so. I mean,
yeah,
people like Geek Addict would disagree with you there, but I think it's definitely Essential Legends. I mean, I think that should have been the first book they printed, right?
yeah,
Ruins of
definitely,
Ruins of Dantooine is a close second.
exactly. And I'm so glad that they did print Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void, which is not the worst Star Wars EU novel ever made. It totally isn't, and it totally is essential to Legends. I hate that book so much. That's the worst EU novel. I've read them all. That is the worst. But don't want to get into some Dawn of the Jedi hate. Um, but I mean, it's inevitable if we start talking about the essential legends because, like you said, some of the art is a little weird. To me, it's nice because it's new EU art, and like for example, with the Revan cover, they depicted a character who we never had art for before. It was one of the Sith characters in that book. I can't remember her name exactly, but it
Hmm.
gives us art of a character we've never seen visually depicted.
Yeah,
But at the same time, some of the art isn't great. Like the Dawn of the Jedi art is terrible, and Yoda Dark Rendezvous art is even worse. Um,
I mean,
you know,
you could just go to Google image search, find a Yoda picture, put it in
yeah,
Photoshop, and just slap it on the cover. I mean, some of that stuff is really really lazy.
yeah,
The one I liked the most, I meant you mentioned the Revan, the Revan cover. The only one I think I like that I could say I definitively like, and it's not better than the original cover, but
yeah.
the what was it, the Back to War with, or is it Krytos Trap? I forget it. I think it was Krytos Trap with
Yes,
Yisene Isard.
I saw.
Isard
Yeah,
on. It's not even close to the Paul Yule artwork of the X-Wing
no,
series, but
the two
that
colored eyes on it, it looks nice.
yeah, I mean it tells, you can tell what the book is by the cover, or at least an expanded universe fan could,
Yeah,
right? And I think it would look cool to someone who didn't know anything about that. That's just my guess. I could be wrong, but yeah, the Dawn of the Jedi cover, man. It's like, I think Matt Wilkins called it like some middle school girl's notebook or something. It was like some notebook sketch. Yeah, that was
uh,
really weird.
I did a stream about it, and my friend Liam, who is the youngest EU fan that I know, he just turned 16, so he's younger than me. So he's the youngest EU fan that I have interacted with. But he described it as like if you were sitting in school and you looked to your left and someone was doodling anime art, like anime ripoff art. That's what it looks like. It looks like someone just sketched it in like 5 minutes. Um, it's see, so some
Yeah.
of that art is not the best, but at the same time, it is new art to the EU. So even though we're not getting new stories, it's kind of nice to me that we're getting. Like, I'm really excited to see what Fatal Alliance's cover looks like because I think that's one of the next ones coming out that they have announced as Fatal Alliance. Is Fatal Alliance essential EU? I mean, some people don't like Fatal Alliance, so some of their picks have been odd. But at the same time, to me, it's collectible and it's cool that we're getting new art for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can say the benefit is the artwork, right? I think we talked about that before we went live, but I don't know. I think the benefit, the real benefit is the fact that it's in big box stores. You
Yeah,
know, nothing else. That it's accessible to people who wouldn't otherwise have reason to be there, or wouldn't have reason to pick that stuff up. So, you know, it's not for us, but we have to recognize, like I said, a win when we see it. So those are my
definitely.
thoughts.
And just going back to the Epic collections briefly, how you mentioned how they're creating the omnibus hardcovers that are like 600 pages, or no, they're bigger than that. I think some of them are like 1,000 pages, um, like 800 to 1,000, I think is what they are. Those big hardcovers that collect, like they essentially collect Epic collections. If the Epic collections are collecting like what a graphic novel would collect into like 2 or 3 graphic novels in Epic collection, those omnibuses are like 2 or 3 Epic collections collected in them. And like you said, you might want to wait till the omnibuses, but at the same time, some of those Epic collections, we don't know if they're going to print every Epic collection into an omnibus until it comes out. Like they've announced lots of omnibuses. It seems like they're going to do everything as an omnibus eventually, but we don't know. And some of those Epic collections go up in price rather quickly. Like the Epic collection that collected Dawn of the Jedi, uh, I passed on it for like $30 and was like, oh, it'll go down, and it's now over like $200 for it. So that's something to account for. Those Epic collections seem like they raise in value over time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even if you go back, like the Crimson Empire saga, the hardcover that Dark Horse put out, I mean
Yeah.
that, I remember buying that from Amazon for $20. It was like the same
Wow.
price. It came out the same day as the Crimson Empire 3 trade paperback, and you could either get that or you could get the whole series in hardcover. So I was like, I'm for sure getting the whole series in hardcover.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stuff has just gone up over the years because it's hard to find, right? They made limited print runs. I don't know what the print runs are on the Epic collections, but they seem to be much lower than they were initially in the 2015, 2016 years, right?
Yeah.
But with the hardcovers, you have the whole deal of, do you want that format, right? Because that is an unwieldy thing. Like, you wouldn't put that in your travel bag if you want some light reading on a weekend, a weekend away or something. But I don't know. It seems to be like some of those are similar to the size of the Life and Legend of Luke Skywalker. I don't know if you have that, but it was like this huge, massive comic collection of like all the Luke Skywalker stories dating back to like the Marvel era. It's almost that size. I mean, you could really hurt somebody throwing that at somebody. So
it's really hard to read for me too. Like, first of all, like there's the dust jacket. You have to deal with that. You have to like put that somewhere safe unless you want to try to read it with a dust jacket sliding around. And then they're huge. You could literally use it as a weapon, like you said. And going away, packing that in your bag, it's gonna rip a hole in your bag, and it's hard to read too. The pages are pretty thin, so like it's nice. Like, I really like the original Marvel Years ones that collect the entire 107 issues. It doesn't include 108, which is a shame. But the three hardcovers have all of 107 plus Pizzazz, plus the UK Weekly and UK Monthly and Empire Strikes Back monthly comics, all in three hardcover volumes. So that's nice. That's like peace of mind for me that like I don't have to collect this 108 issue series over like 6 Epic collections or like the 7 a long time ago graphic novels that Dark Horse did. But at the same time, it's really hard to read them.
Yeah, I would prefer the smaller versions. If I had a choice, right, it would be the original trade paperbacks, right? I think that's the easiest format for me. Um, with the Epic collections, the page quality isn't the best.
Yeah.
You mentioned you didn't like the Dark Horse omnibus because they shrink the size down to a lower page size. I agree with that, but the pages were more resilient. Like, you could throw that in your bag and it won't get frazzled, on the way. But with the Epic collections, I remember I was reading the Thrawn trilogy one, and I just threw it in a suitcase, and it the pages were bashed in by the time I came back. So I don't know. It's something to think about. It's a decision you have to make as a collector. I don't know how long the bindings will hold up on some of those older collections. So it might always be in your best interest to buy the most recent version, if you have the choice, right? But it's a personal decision, I guess.
Comics to me are pretty hard to collect for the EU just because of how many there are. And there's these tail short comics that you have to account for. And do you want to have for example, like the Empire comic series, right? You could get it as single issues, or you could get it as the original Dark Horse trade paperbacks, or you could get it as the Dark Horse omnibuses that were shrunk down, or you could get it as Epic collections, or you could get it as the big Marvel hardcover omnibuses. But with the old Dark Horse graphic novels, the binding for me on those is like getting really loose. It's not holding up. Then the trouble with the Dark Horse omnibuses for me is they're smaller, and there aren't as many of those around, and most of those copies are beaten up. Then the Epic collections break those arcs up because even though it's really nice that it goes in chronological order, it does break up the runs as they were originally released and intended. So although it's nice that those tail short comics are in order, and I love that as someone who loves continuity, at the same time, it breaks up how the series originally went, which could be frustrating if you're just trying to read that series. And then we've already discussed some of the issues with the giant clunky Marvel hardcover omnibuses as well. Those are just really difficult. And then that's more of the same. It's just so many things thrown together chronologically, which is great for continuity, but at the same time, if you're just trying to read Empire, the comic series, that's going to be tricky in the Epic Collection or the new Marvel omnibuses. But at the same time, those older prints are starting to fall apart a bit more. So
Right.
it's just kind of difficult.
Yeah, I would, to make that decision, you have to take into account a couple different factors. Do you want to collect everything, right? If you want everything, I think it's in your best bet to get the larger collections, as long as you don't mind, reading something that's a little bit more cumbersome. Um, the fact that it includes more material and you don't have to go out and find individual stories, I think the benefit of those larger, printings are better.
Yeah,
Um, but if you just want to read a specific story, or if you're concerned about having something like the Dark Empire endnotes, or if you're concerned about having, what is it, the Vow of Justice, the Prelude to Rebellion
yeah,
prequel, I think those are printed in only specific versions. So you have to
yeah,
do a little bit more research. I have a mishmash of things. Sometimes I have duplicate versions of
yeah,
things. I have maybe two of them, but because of the continuity, a lot of people don't have the comics on their shelf alongside the books.
yeah,
I always did. But what are the worst things that you can have on your shelf are those single issue comics. That
yeah,
looks absolutely terrible. They're too tall. They have a bagged and boarded. They
yeah,
just they look bad. So I'd
yeah.
prefer to have them in some sort of trade paperback, in some sort of epic collection, omnibus, whatever you want. So even though I have a lot of those single issues because I already bought them, I go ahead and buy these collections because they include a lot of that material.
If I could, I would reprint all the Dark Horse graphic novels. It would just collect like 5 or 6 issues in each one, just because that's my favorite way to read it. I think it's a great size, and I think it looks really nice on a shelf. Like those single issues, like you said, are really difficult. But I just wanted to touch briefly on those single issues because if you were to buy every EU comic as a single issue, because I know some people who are trying to do that, and I try to dissuade them. Like, look at these omnibuses. You could just get that all right here. But some people want to get them all individually, and that's a pain for reading. To have to put it back in the sleeve with the cardboard and get to the next one. And for me, I have to tape the back um, closed, shut. So like it's a hassle. But then at the same time, there's some collecting benefits to it because I have a copy that was a special cover that there were only 1,000 printed, so that's like really cool to have. And then there's like the gold foil Tales of the Jedi and Dark Empire, and there's like the platinum like foil versions of those where they like um, well, there's you can look it up. There's like they only did like 2,000 or 3,000 of them. So there's some really cool stuff that you can get. It's just gonna be so time consuming and impractical to read if you're trying to get all the single issues.
Well, and now it is, right? But I think back to when I was collecting, and you had no choice but to get the single issues in a lot of
Yeah,
cases, right? Because a story like River of Chaos, it was never collected in anything until you had the first Dark Horse omnibus. So you were forced to get the collection.
yeah,
You think about something else like the Frida Nad Uprising, right? They
yeah,
had a short 2 issue trade paperback that
yeah,
was extremely limited printing. They
yeah.
did the same thing for Empire's End, by the way.
Yes.
That was just impossible to find. So for the longest time, I had to just buy the single issues.
Mm.
I had no other choice. I eventually tracked down the trade paperback for the Freedom Net Uprising.
Wow, you
Beautiful,
found that?
yeah.
That's crazy.
It,
I always wanted to get that, but it's like so thin. It's like the size of the you know how the Tails issues were thick enough that they could put the printing down the spine of the Star Wars Tales individual issues. Is it about that thin?
yeah, it's about the size of a thick Tails,
Yeah.
single issue. Um,
Wow.
but they also did a 30th anniversary version of that for the Dark. Was it 30th or 25th? I forget. But Dark Horse did like an anniversary set of hardcovers. The first one of
Oh yeah,
which
yeah, yeah.
was the Freedom Net Uprising. They also did Jedi vs. Sith and a couple others. So that was another way to get it. I I eventually got that first, but then I found, and it's funny because the more printings they make, it influences the prices on the secondary market for some of the older stuff. So there was a period of time where things like Empire's End, the trade paperback, the Friedenat Uprising trade paperback, they had went down in value. So things fluctuated over time, but yeah, you didn't have a lot of choice back in the day when I was collecting, other than to get single issues in a lot of cases.
Like for Shadow Stalker and River of Chaos, like you said, and annoyingly, like the Republic comic series didn't collect some stuff like the
Star Crash,
Star Crash, and Infinity's End, I think was the other one.
Yeah.
Like frustrating, and that was the only way you could get it.
Yeah, I think it was even some of the R.S. Singh comics. Like they might have printed trade paperbacks, but they were very hard to find, and I just ended up getting the single issues. I know people like Matt Wilkins. He said he has everything in single issues, and he has it in boxes, so it's very cumbersome to pull out the issues. I think if you already have the collections, keep it. It's great. It's great to have the letters to the editors in the back, all that extra stuff. I think Marcel Ryan actually has the Tales of the Jedi in single issues, which is amazing. I wish I had that, but
he even recently went out and got the gold foil version as well.
The gold foil version, I think I have the Ashcan edition.
That's really cool too.
Just black and white. Yeah, there are some exclusive versions. I think they did a little bit more with the exclusive versions around the time of like Invasion. I think I have one of those.
That's one I have. That's one of only 1,000 copies. It's a Invasion issue 1 with the different covers. So some of those like different covers kind of incentivize collecting, but like for practicality, is it a good idea to just go out and get all the single issues?
Yes. If you're a new fan, if you're just getting into this, take advantage of the fact that they're printing these giant collections. I mean, use that to your advantage. Don't make things harder on yourself than they already are. And on that topic, somewhat related to that, the same thing is true with the short stories from Star Wars Insider, right? Buy those Titan collections, right? Because I don't know, to have all of those in one issue, even if it has a couple of canon stories, you don't need to read that. Just buy the dang collection, man. I'm like, people got so bent out of shape that it said Legends on it, and then it has Expanded Universe and the new canon. And the people that covered that on YouTube, I'm not going to name names, but they don't even know which stories are canon and which stories are Expanded Universe. I mean, I'm like, Jesus, just buy the collection. Take the win when you get it, man.
And of course, it would have been nice if they just done one EU collection and one Disney canon collection instead of like doing a deal 1 for 2. But like, it's what we got, and it's better. It's better to get that than have a bunch of single issues to put on a shelf that don't look nice and harder to read. It's better to get that in a nice little. I think it was a hardcover to put on a shelf. I mean, I don't think they're going to do a number 3 because I think it's sold poorly.
Well, I think they've done pretty much all the stories that they had under the Titan collection, right? If they had the permission to go back and do Wizards of the Coast, I forget the other publishers of Star Wars Insider, but it's changed hands quite a bit over the years. I would love for them to do everything under Wizards of the Coast, all of those Rogues Gallery articles, all of those Who's Who in the Grand Admiral's Who's Who in the Cantina Band, all that stuff. I would buy that in a heartbeat. I have a handful of insiders, but I don't have everything, and it's very cumbersome to go back and, well, first of all, it's just nice to have everything in one issue, right? I think there's something benefit to say about that, but it's much better than the alternative, which is having a digital version, right? So I have some insider hard versions, physical versions, and then I have some that are just digital, right? So if you're looking for a specific short story, like, okay, do I have this issue, or do I have to go look on my computer to read this short story? So it's a mess, man. I'd prefer to have it all in one.
Definitely. And bringing back to magazines, like um, the Gamer magazine that was really short lived. I would absolutely love it if they did a collection with all of the short fiction from that all together in one volume. Obviously, that's probably never going to happen. Um, it would be nice, but like, and then there's all these other things I would like like imagine if they printed out the hyperspace stories in a physical collection. Like there's so many opportunities that they could print off all the evasive action comics into a binded copy and sell that. And I think they were going to do that before before Disney bought Star Wars. But there's so many opportunities for like online stuff and old magazines that they could collect stuff together. And as it stands, you have to either like print it out or read it on a computer, or find an archive of it on the internet, or print it off yourself using like Lulu or something like that. It's difficult, and there's such a market for it. All of If they announced a hyperspace fiction collection, we would all go out and buy that instantly. But there's so much opportunity, but they're not doing it, and then it makes it difficult for people who like physical copies
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
You definitely brought up a lot there. As far as how much that would sell, I can just say from like the Titan collections, I didn't see that at Barnes and Noble, right?
No.
I didn't see that in any store other than my local comic book store, which is really big on EU stuff. I mean, they have a lot of action figures, a lot of old comics, so they had that there, but pretty much it was just an Amazon exclusive, really.
Yeah.
And you gotta make it available for people to buy it, and
Yeah.
you can't really expect, if you do no marketing, right, because they did no marketing on this, people aren't going to buy it. So you have to take certain practicalities into consideration like that. I mean, Lulu, I have a lot of thoughts on Lulu too. Like we can maybe
Yeah.
keep that for another segment. But as far as like collecting, you mentioned like the Star Wars gamer, right? I think that's a small enough issue. I think there's 10 issues or something like that, to where those are fairly easily to collect in their entirety. Something like Star Wars Insider has hundreds and
Yeah.
hundreds of issues, right? It's so difficult to collect. And if you buy a lot, you're going to get a lot of duplicates. It's a tough
Yeah.
deal, man. I know, because I've tried to buy them. It's tough to collect. I have all the gamers. I got those fairly easy.
Yeah.
Star Wars Galaxy, that again is pretty easy. If you want to buy the polyhedrons, the challenge, the inquest, sometimes you have to go overseas to buy some of that stuff, because
Some of
the
the
art the
foreign ones too.
well, inquest, I don't know, for whatever reason, um, they seem to be more popular overseas,
Hmm.
for some reason. I don't know why that was. I mean, card games were big here, but you
Was
had a
that
lot of big.
was that in the UK? That Inquest, or where? Where
It
overseas?
Inquest, I forget where I bought it, but it was somewhere in Europe. It was Switzerland, Belgium. So it might have been Belgium, that I bought some of this stuff from, and that was where a lot of the Decipher product was printed. Right, they had a
Yeah.
headquarters in, I think it was Virginia over here, but a lot of their card stock was actually printed or developed over there. So for whatever reason, they I don't know about the RPGs, but the card game market, I had to buy a lot of those magazines overseas.
Yeah, that's quite interesting there, especially considering that like they're printed in English, Inquest, Gamer, and stuff like that. But getting to some of those magazines like Polyhedron and Inquest and Challenge, and there's so many different ones that were like RPGs firstly, but they did have Star Wars material. What One of the coolest ones that I have is called Role Player Independent. That they had two issues with Star Wars material, issue 3 and issue 8. And since I have family in the UK, I was able to go over there and
Hmm.
buy it off of eBay.co.uk for like £5, which is like 750 US dollars, something like that. um, super cheap, and I then lost a bid on number 8 and wasn't able to get number 8. But I was really happy with number 3, and like that's 2 issues of a series from only the UK with this 2 pages, literally 2 pages of new EU Star Wars material. Like it's to me, it's almost hard to justify it, but at the same time, how could you pass that up? A chance like that because
No,
it's hard to find.
you're exactly right. A lot of times you're just buying 1 or 2 pages. You're
Yeah.
not really getting much of an event. Uh, you might get one new character or something.
Yeah.
I think Christopher Nelson did a couple videos of like certain one-off characters that were
Yeah.
featured in this one issue of this foreign magazine or this obscure RPG
Yeah.
magazine. Those people don't have like I don't know, they might have Wikipedia articles, but a lot of this is just
Yeah.
so obscure, so inside baseball. It's hard to justify, but if you're a completist, it's something to collect, right? If you really want to know everything, every story in the expanded universe, it's another rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah.
But don't expect much. I'll just say, with that caution.
Yeah. It to me it's worth it, but not at the same time. It's so weird because it's like I really want to get that because of how obscure it is, but at the same time you're literally getting almost nothing. That it's like, was that worth it? And to a completist, yes. To someone who's looking to read all of the EU, who was told to go buy like Inquest Gamer number 80, you're gonna come
Mhm.
away thinking, why did I spend like $15 on this? But for completists who like have everything already, it's terrific for that being like if you have all the books and all the comics and all the video games, and then you did all the picture books and you really got everything, that's something else to get. That's something else to get while we have no EU. So it's nice for that, I suppose.
Yeah, and the other thing is you don't need to go at this blind, right? There's digital versions
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff, and you can actually read it to see if this is something you might be interested in getting. I've had a lot of trouble because when you buy some of these magazines, you're buying them blind. I know what story there are, but I don't know the condition of the magazine, right? A
Mm,
lot of this
yeah.
is just stock,
Stock images.
stock
Yeah.
photos of 108 of I'm just making up a number of Challenge magazine or whatever. um you get some pretty disgusting stuff sometimes. I'll just say it's not the freshest, definitely
Yeah.
smells, and you don't really want to infect your collection with mold spores or anything like that. So you have to be careful with what you buy. Some of the stuff you buy, it's not going to be in acceptable condition. You just have to turn around, toss it, call it a loss. But I would definitely research the stories, so that you know what you're buying, at least as far as content. Um, because, like, for me, I'm a big fan of the Jedi Prince series. So the
Yeah.
Polyhedron magazines that discussed like the Prophets of the Dark Side
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
sequels to that. I mean, that was a must buy for me. I don't ever regret buying that for a second. Right? It's like it's only a couple pages of material, but it's super cool. You get to a spotlight on these new characters, what they were doing
Yeah.
during the Jedi Prince series, and it's great. It's great. So if it's something you're interested in like that, it's definitely worth a while.
Um, what you said, my mind is going so many different places. There's just we could do 4 or 5 videos,
For
all
sure.
like hours long about collecting. There's just so many different facets and avenues you could go down. Like what you said about condition, that's very interesting because condition can be difficult. Like especially with the children's picture books, some of those, the best condition is going to be like really beat up, and you'd be lucky to get it without like stains on the inside of the covers because kids weren't always careful with their books. I have two, Shiny as a droid and Fuzzy as an Ewok. Fuzzy as an Ewok now goes for over $200, and it's a
Wow.
new EU story, but I got it for $15 in like acceptable condition, and it's beaten up. Like the outside's beaten up, the inside's beaten up. But am I going to pay $200 for one that's only in slightly better condition, or am I going to pay for the one that's beaten up, that's $15 and is a good deal? It's difficult because some people like condition is like their number one thing. They have to have it. Like only good games is someone I know who he has to have like new or better. It is his philosophy with his collection. To me, I just need it not to be like the pages torn out or like stained and marked. Like, so my standards are lower, but some of it you literally can't get
Yeah,
crisp, or you'd
yeah.
be paying hundreds. It's really challenging.
I mean the children's books. I'm thinking like the droids and the Ewoks,
Yeah,
picture books. A lot of those, yes, they're beat up. Yes, they're really old. Yes, they don't show up on eBay, places like eBay too often. I remember getting a lot of mine through what was it, thrift books.
mm,
I think that's a good way to go. You could check like half price books maybe, but the thing with those children's books is, yes, they were made maybe 70s sometimes. I don't know. You're talking the original trilogy storybooks, but they were very like they were made around easily. You can actually do a lot as far as like removing markers, any dirt, any like foreign substances on there. You can clean those up pretty well because they're like glossy covers. So
yeah,
I find like you could buy a trashed version off of half price books or thrift books or something like that and make it presentable. So
yeah. And like some of those picture books, to me, some people might not think they're essential. Like, but so, I mean, they're not. But like for completists, again, it's like how in depth do you want to go with your collection? And to me, the picture books are like just as important as the comics or books to me because I just really enjoy them. I think they're really great, and some of them are really hard to get. Like the scholastic ones that were only available through the school market. So like only teachers or kids in like middle school could obtain them, and some of those are really hard to get. And then not picture books, but young readers novels like the missions books and the young readers novel or the episode one adventure young readers
mhm.
novels. Those were expensive because you were paying a subscription to get them, and then most of them were going to kids who weren't very careful with them, and those are just kind of hard to find, and those are difficult to get because of the game books, and I think it's the episode one adventures aren't very clearly marked what's a novel and what's a game book. So like there were times where I'd buy a novel on eBay and it would come as the game book, which the game book isn't really the story. So it becomes tricky that way.
With those missions and episode one and episode two adventures, I would highly suggest, because if you buy those in single books, you're going to pay an absolute fortune because
Yeah,
the mark on those are crazy. They don't come up often, but I would be super patient and just shell out the money for an entire collection when
yeah,
it shows up. It may be hundreds of dollars, but it's worthwhile. It's much better than paying $20, $15 a pop for a 20 issue series, for a 10 issue series. I was fortunate enough, at least for the episode one series, I was actually in school when they had that as a scholastic promotion.
nice.
So I got the whole like carrying case, and it was like a very simple. It was almost like an RPG where you choose your weapon, you choose your ship, you'd have a character, and
Yeah,
you'd read the. You hardly ever read the novel. You just went off the game book, and it would tell you your adventure. You could play as Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, or
yeah,
I think there was one with Darth Maul, I remember.
yeah,
Um, but
and Jar Jar too.
yeah, as an expanded universe fan, you really just need the novel. You don't need any of that game book extra stuff unless you want it for the sake of having it. As far as the story, you only need the novel. And on the episode two collection, um, I should preface this by saying that they reprinted a lot of the episode one stories in that. So you'll
You
see.
You only need 1 to 6 because 7 and
1 to
onwards were reprints of the episode 1.
exactly. So do some research before you buy that stuff, but I would recommend waiting, being patient until you can buy those as one full collection. It will save you some money. That's what I did, at least with the missions books. I think I bought 1 to 18, and then I had to buy 19 and 20. Those were both really expensive on their
19
own.
and 19 and 20 are like 30, $40 they go for, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think I paid about $20 each on average for those, but I
Yeah.
bought 1 to 18, and that was, made things a lot easier in my opinion. So
Yeah. And while we're on the subject of young readers novels, there's other young readers novels that are kind of hard to obtain. Jedi Apprentice, Jedi Quest, Last of the Jedi, the Boba Fett ones, Rebel Force, Galaxy of Fear, Junior Jedi Knights, and all of those are really hard to obtain just because they haven't been reprinted. Do you see a scenario where they could be reprinted in any format?
I
Because
could just say I think they were reprinted. I got these about circa
wow,
2008, 2009.
yeah,
It's very odd. They're still in shrink wrap. This was after they've been in stores because these came out 2002, 2003.
yeah,
If I'm remembering right, there was something funny going on where there was either a second print run, maybe they found a bunch of them, but there was a time on eBay. I don't know if these are, I don't notice anything funny about these. I mean, they have all the logos, they have all the barcodes. They even age similar because they've been in the sunlight. The pages turn yellow, or at least the corners of them do. Where I've seen just shrink wrap copies of certain book series, even certain trade paperback comics.
I've
I remember.
I saw a shrink wrapped the Science Adventures that had been shrink wrapped, and those were in the 90s. So I saw those shrink wrapped on eBay, and I was like thinking, were those sealed since the 90s? Because I don't think they were sold together. Like that was that 2000s as well, because they looked in really good shape.
I think that would have been like after the special edition. So we're looking at like 98 maybe.
Yeah,
Um, it's very weird. I don't know if those are legitimate or not, but I've seen some weird things where you wouldn't exactly think that you could find things in super shrink wrap, super mint
yeah,
condition, and everything looks legitimate. This isn't, by the way, this isn't the only version of these I have, but um, I've done comparisons and they look the same. This kind of whole topic leads into the Lulu discussion
yeah,
that I thought, but you see some weird stuff from time to time. I don't know if these are kept in warehouses for years. It's possible, but you could be surprised what you find. I in general, if you're patient enough, I don't think any of the young readers, although they're not in print, I don't think they're hard to find. Between Lulu, between the secondary market, you can get all the young reader books in fairly decent shape pretty easily, in my opinion.
yeah. And that kind of leads into Lulu, like you were saying, because on with Lulu, there are files you can obtain to where you could get 5 of the young readers novels bound together in like a hardcover collection, the size of a standard like Del Rey hardcover.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think of Lulu? Because I I'll just tell you my stance with like Luluing stuff. I have no problem if that's what you do for your collection to get like stuff all together. Um, that's cool. But to me, I only use it for stuff that can't be obtained in print. So like the online ebooks or short stories that were only online, get them in collections like Skywalkers or like Heart of the Jedi, Lightsider. Those are the stuff that I typically go for. I did make one exception because I saw the Dark Forces graphic novels, which are really hard to get. Someone had taken all of those and put them into one paperback, and so I got that because I thought that was pretty cool. But for the most part, don't want to use it to get stuff that I could get the original imprint versions of, because I'd prefer to have the imprint versions, even though they're less easy to find. I just would prefer to have it that way. So I just use it for like the stuff that they never put it in print, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. I mean, that's fair. The way I look at it, Lulu sort of, I mean, it's been around for many years, but I noticed like with Star Wars printing, it seemed to have taken off at least as a fandom discussion item ever since the Heart of the Jedi
Yeah,
around May of 2001, right? That's really when it became like a mainstream topic. I mean, people had done fan printings before then, but I don't have any problem with anybody creating a printing of anything that they want, right? The issue that comes up is there's some people that are so good at these fan printings
yeah,
that they're not just printing, a bind up of the Junior Jedi Knights, right? That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about them making sci-fi book club
yeah,
versions or printing out a bunch of sci-fi book club dust jackets, which notoriously just disintegrate over time. Even if you just look at them wrong, they'll they
yeah.
seem to disintegrate. But passing those off as original or to
SFBC, yeah.
or to the point where they get mixed in amongst legitimate sci-fi book club versions to where you can't tell the difference. And I fear that's, if that hasn't already happened, that's going to happen very soon.
And some of the SFBC stuff, most of that was Bantam era, correct? For those
so,
SFBC copies.
so they did that all the way to the end.
Okay.
I kick myself every day for not becoming a member because I definitely could have done that at any time. But yeah, they printed sci-fi book club versions of everything like Shadow Games, Kenobi, um, Crucible too. I don't remember seeing one recently, but I think they did that stuff. Mercy Kill all the way to the very very end.
And
Um,
what makes them distinct is their own size, right? That makes them unique.
yeah,
And I think they did the Last Jedi too, right? By Michael Reeves, and wasn't that like the only way you could get it? Is a hardcover SFBC? But
yes, there's several books that were only printed by what am I thinking? Del Rey in paperback format.
yeah,
So the way to get hardcover versions was through the Sci-Fi Book Club version, and things like Yoda Dark Rendezvous. If you wanted a hardcover, that was the way to get it. Last Jedi, the Coruscant Knights, 3-in-1 bind up. That was the way to get it. Things like the Mandalorian trilogy, Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy. A lot of stuff only came out in hardcover through Sci-Fi Book Club, and for whatever reason, I mean, they've always been available on the secondary market, right?
mm,
Um,
yeah,
but certain titles have either not been there or there's way too many of a title. Like I remember a couple years ago, I was trying to finish off the New Jedi Order, in Sci-Fi Book Club version,
yeah.
and there was way too many. The Final Prophecy. For some reason, like why would that be far more common than anything else? It
Mm,
just you see funny stuff going on like that. They used to have ads of the Sci-Fi Book Club company in certain comics, in certain magazines, so you
yeah.
can see what they actually printed. And then there's some in those ads like Cross Current and Riptide. Um, I've never seen Sci-Fi Book Club versions of
Mm.
those. I've never seen them for sale. Um,
And for formatting compared to what a standard hardcover from Del Rey would be, they're shorter, right?
yeah, what are they about the size of? They're about the size of a Dark Horse omnibus comic,
Okay.
almost exactly. Um, the omnibus is maybe a little bit taller, but they're roughly
Right.
this. that size. And you could go crazy trying to get a uniform collection of,
And
all the books in a series. It became frustrating for things like Legacy of the Force, right? Where
yeah,
they
yeah,
printed some hardcovers, Del Rey printed some hardcovers, some paperbacks.
yeah,
So you're better off, if you want everything uniform, just buy everything in Sci-Fi Book Club size. And now with
and
Lulu you can, but
yeah, because
is it the original? Is it the original? Do you care, right?
yeah,
Because I care about having the original. I don't like to not know whether mine is genuine or not,
yeah,
and that's the problem I have with it. I have no problem with people printing their own versions for their own use or even to sell them, but that's probably illegal. But
yeah.
if you want to do that, go ahead. I want to know if it's real or not. I don't want to have to do digging to find out, is my version genuine or not.
Now,
Because go ahead.
do you know if the SFBC did every EU novel
No, they
overall?
did.
They
Uh,
didn't do X-Wing, right? And so
they
you
didn't.
can Lulu X-Wing SFBCs.
Yeah, they didn't do X-Wing, and then I'm unsure if they did things like, I know I've seen advertisements for Riptide and Crosscurrent, and then I didn't see advertisements for things like Kenobi, but I've seen actual ones that somebody bought in their collection. I have a lot of them. There's some I'm missing. Um, I don't know if there's a list anywhere. There probably is on Wikipedia. I don't know if you look at book formats if they have that category, but yeah, they did most of them with some exceptions, like you said, the X-wing series.
Yeah, and something I wanted to ask regarding Lulu. Um, Lulu to me seems pretty inconsistent with their quality. Some stuff arrives in looking better than other printings.
Yeah,
From my experience, and I have a friend who is considering Heart of the Jedi, and they missed out on that Amazon print. And to me, I was telling them, and I was talking about this, the Amazon printing, I think, is a lot better quality than the Lulu quality for how it's printed and like how nice it looks. But then, of course, now that it's pulled from Amazon, there's scalpers who are selling it for hundreds for the
right.
Heart of the Jedi Amazon copies. And then I think I think was it Dylan who was covering this on the expandeduniverse.com. Some people were making new prints of Heart of the Jedi and putting them on eBay and saying that they were Amazon Heart of the Jedi prints that may
Yeah,
have been Lulu'd. So
yeah.
that's what do you think of all of that?
I mean, whenever you're trying to fool the buyer, that's not cool, man. I
No.
mean, and that's why you have to do your research as a collector, as a fan. If this is something you really want, you can't just go in blind. You have to know what you're trying to buy. Know if it's too good to be true. Know if you're getting, swindled as far as paying too much for certain things. Dylan did a great job about certain things to look out for. It. I think he tracked the price over many weeks of sales. I agree with you that I think the Amazon printing in May of 2021, I think that was a great version.
Mm-hmm.
For just for being a fan and remembering like the 2015 era, I can see why people would want the 2015 version that Matt's had. I think Christopher Nelson's expressed that he'd want to buy a copy if had someone had one for sale.
Where was
Uh,
that through again? Would you remind me what site was used for that?
it was Lulu, but it was
It
it
was
was
on. It wasn't custom printed. It was like on the site. To
well, it was as soon as Joe released like 2 chapters at a time on StarWarsTimeline.net, and he released it over many months.
yeah,
So by the time the whole book was released, I think it was like close to 2016. Somebody started putting together the files for a Lulu short fan printing, and it was available to only people who knew about it. I didn't even know, and I was pretty involved in the fan community at that time. I totally missed it. I know a lot of people who missed it, and it got shut down really quick.
And it was a hardcover, right?
It
Instead
was
of
a
a
hard it was
paperback.
a hardcover. There's a ton of fan versions of the Heart of the Jedi out there over the
Yeah.
years. There's many versions. I mean, a lot of people have just independently came up with their own bootleg version, and that's fine. But if you want a specific version, you really need to know what to look for. There's a lot of copies. There's a lot of people who use essentially the same files, but was it printed in 2000? You know, you could use that same file and print it today.
Yeah.
Is it the same as the 2015 version? I would say no, right?
Because
Because
only a couple hundred exist.
yeah,
Yeah.
it goes back to that collectability aspect. That I want the 2015 version. I don't want a duplicate printing with the same file that was printed in 2023.
Yeah.
I want the original. So same thing with things like imprint. Is like, it's fine to have a digital version and it's only 7 pages. You could very easily print your own, but there's something about, I if I were to buy it, I'd want the original. Like, I'd pay up to have the original rather than just pay.
Do fan printings of imprint exist?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
That's interesting. My friend, who I mentioned earlier, Only Good Games, paid an arm and a leg in the recent imprint that popped up on eBay a couple weeks ago. He bought that from Australia, and that went high.
Yeah,
That went high.
I was bidding against them.
You were bidding against him.
Full disclosure. Yeah, my max. I figured I'm going to pay $100 for this,
Yeah.
and it didn't go. It was $50 until the last minute or so, but
Yeah.
and it went for like 300, something Australian. Like,
Yeah.
you can very easily get to paying astronomical amounts when you're not sure what the currency
Yeah.
value, the currency equivalent is. So you
Yeah.
got to be careful with some of that.
Do we know how many copies of imprint were available? Like I remember thousands. There were as many as thousands. That was through
tens of thousands, I'm sure.
Okay. It's just, did people throw them out? Like, they're incredibly hard to find.
I'm sure a lot of people threw them out if they didn't want them anymore.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that you're going to turn around and sell. I mean, it's 7 pages. It's like an instruction manual. I mean, you're gonna throw it. You're either gonna keep it in your own personal collection, or you're gonna throw it away. It very rarely comes up on the secondary market. They do come around, but very rare.
Yeah, and that's precisely why they're now valuable. So people who were throwing them out because they thought, I can't sell this, it's precisely them throwing it away that drives it up and means they could have sold it, which is a shame for people like myself and you who really want to get imprint. But I'm going to be very cautious about that now, considering that fan printings could be passed off perhaps on the market as being the original Bantha Club Tracks version from 09 or whenever that was.
Yeah, the real danger is if you don't know if it's original. If someone's selling it and says it's a fan printing, great, that's cool.
Yeah.
As long as I know, right? And that's why you have to do your research. You have to know, does this look legitimate? And if they're so good at the fan printing that you can't tell, I think that's troubling from a collector's standpoint. So it's something to be aware of. I'm not trying to raise alarm, in the fan community. It's just something to think about if you're concerned about getting the original version, or what you think you're buying is the original version.
And that's exactly why Dylan did that series on the expandeduniverse.com, because there were fan printings trying to replicate the Amazon Lulu one and saying that it's the Amazon Lulu one when actually it's something else. So for people, see, with the Amazon Lulu 2021 May Heart of the Jedi printing, to me that is a piece of EU history, because that was a big deal. That outsold the High Republic on Amazon. On Amazon's new release for a couple weeks. That was really cool. I that was a cool time. Those weeks when I was like, this book that was never published can now be bought on Amazon for the 2 weeks it lasted, right? And to me, that's a cool piece to have. So I can see why people would really want the 2021 paperback printing. And for people to try to be deceiving and pretending that it's the Amazon print when it's actually something they Lulu'd, that is troubling. And
Yeah.
good thing that Dylan caught onto that there.
And there's a ton of other self-publishing websites other than Lulu and
Yeah,
Amazon. I mean, they're a dime a dozen. So yes, you'd be wary of fakes. As far as like the Heart of the Jedi and the whole hype about that, I was taken by surprise like anything else. Like I couldn't believe the fan interest in that. You
yeah,
know, Kenneth Flint did a sort of a media tour around that time, going to all these channels. A lot of them not even EU channels, right? They were
yeah,
just so interested in this expanded universe book that was never really cleared to be printed. It was completed,
yeah,
but it was edited, and it's not really expanded universe. It's fun to read, and it's fun to get a idea of what would have been. But I think it was the whole aspect that it was successful as it was. I think that was a little embarrassing to Joe and to Kenneth. The fact that he did all this, he did this media tour, and he didn't get any money off it. Privately,
yeah,
I think there was some, oh man, this really sucks, because
yeah,
it just tears the scab off the wound a little bit, that's really hurt his writing career.
yeah.
And it could have been successful. This proves it would have been successful if it had been released officially in 1992. It would have done even better than it was now, 100% for sure.
Yeah.
So you know it's a little bittersweet at the same time. But yeah, it was amazing how good it did on Amazon. I couldn't believe the success that it had. There's something about the look of a new paperback book, a new hardcover book, even for things like Lightsider. It seemed like it was released and people weren't really interested in it. But now that you see Lulu versions of Lightsider out there, people are starting to take interest. It's like, oh, it's a book I can read. There's something,
Yeah.
I don't know, that people gravitate toward a physical paperback or hardcover book versus something that's just a digital file.
Exactly. Instantly generates interest. And I was about to say, do you think? Because I've been talking to a bunch of people, and some people have been telling me that they think Lightsider will be available on Amazon. In the same way of Heart of the Jedi. Would you like theoretically, if that occurred, would you see that doing as well as Heart of the Jedi did? Could you see like it regenerating all of that fan hype around it to where even non-EU fans were aware of it because of all these news outlets news outlets were talking about it if you could go onto websites. What do you think the response to Lightsider being on Amazon would be?
I think it should have the same reception, but it won't. And the reason why is it's only 70. I think it's less than 75 pages, right?
Yeah,
Um, it's just not a book, right? For some reason, books do better. I mean,
yeah,
you could pass it off and make it look like a book. Blow up the font so that it's super thick on the bookshelf.
yeah,
I think they do that for some of the other Lulu printings, but I don't see it taking off like the other one did. It's a little bit more obscure, and yes,
yeah,
nobody knew about Heart of the Jedi, really. I mean, some of us hardcore EU fans knew about it, but the fact that it was a Bantam novel of the early uh, Bantam era, where the EU took off, right? It was 1992. It could have very easily been Truce at Bakura
yeah.
instead. Because of that, people take more interest in it, I guess. The fact that it's a book and the fact of when it came out, um, those two together.
In the copy of Lightsider that I have that was Lulu'd, that was you gotten using Lulu. It has both the original manuscript and like a 2008 re-edited script, so that it like lengthens the book out, and it has interviews done about Lightsider, like in it, so like it kind of pads it out. That was how they like made it like thicker on a bookshelf.
Oh, okay. Okay. I don't
So
have a physical version. I've only read the PDF, and I've only read I think it was the 1997 version that has notes, it has corrections, it has spelling errors, it has,
yeah,
uh, it even has problems like with the names of the dark side adepts. I think, I forget how many there were. I think there were 9 and 2 of them died. So it's like the set, maybe there were 7, but the 2 that died in the book aren't the same of the 2 that you would have known died having you read, Dark Empire 2, right?
right.
Because
Yeah,
there's 2 names that are brand new that you don't recognize. Well, it's 2 other names that died that actually happened in the PDF that I have. So, and
right.
there's other problems, like they take a squad of like 4 stormtroopers. One of them gets shot. There's 5 left. I was like, that's not correct math, right?
Yeah,
So there's weird. I haven't read the 2008 version. There might be more versions out there. I don't know, but I've always had the 2000 or the 1997 version.
I read the 2008 script and I didn't notice anything like
Okay.
that. So it must have been re-edited. I don't know. You know who? I don't know who was involved in re-editing them. Like I don't think it was the. Uh,
No.
I'm not sure who was involved with that. Fans or maybe there was the guy who gave the files to Matt Wilkins, as he expresses it. Maybe he was re-editing it around that time.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think Tom Veach would have spent one more second of his unpaid time working
no,
on it. I mean, there was talk of him actually converting the characters and doing it as a fantasy story, non
yeah,
Star Wars, but have the same basics of the story, because you could very easily convert that into something else.
yeah,
Um, but I don't think he would ever spend any more of his time on that current version. So I think if you're looking at what's the most accurate version that isn't fan touched, what would have been the closest to the actual version, it's the 1997 version.
yeah. I'm looking forward to reading it because the paperback has both versions. So it'll be interesting to kind of compare and see the
Yeah.
differences as you go along. But um, is there anything else that you had in your mind to talk about?
Oh man, I just had tons of promo items to show off, but um, I we could talk about miniatures all day, right? It's like
Those
K
were those
K
were like
Wing.
promoted in the sorry, those were like promoted in the back of like the Dark Horse comics, right? Some of those stuff
Yeah,
in this issue.
this is done by Fantasy Flight, but the first version of X-wing had a ton of EU ships, like, and I think they had cards associated with it. Like if you bought the Y-wing, you get Colonel Salm. If you bought like the K-wing, you get the pilots in the Black Fleet Crisis. There's a ton of connections in that. And my favorite promo item, uh, EU Legends Con. Just wanted to show that off because I'm 100% in on Legends Con. By the
You'll
way,
be there. You'll be there.
I haven't decided yet, but I'm 100% in on Legends Con. Um,
Okay.
I'll definitely wear this shirt, this Czech Baka shirt, if I do go.
No, that's a piece of collecting that everyone needs to get that shirt.
Yes, for sure. Follow at Legends Con News on Twitter too for all your Legends Con updates.
Yeah.
I'll just say that I'm not. I may or may not be behind that. Just
Yeah.
throw that out there.
Yes. And those sticker packs are pretty cool.
Yeah. There's
Collecting.
there's bookmarks. There's stickers. You get exclusive behind the scenes cosplay photos. I don't know why anyone would want that, but
Yeah.
I mean, some curious decisions. I mean, I wish them all the best. I mean, we could have a whole discussion on Legends Con. I'm very
Yeah.
very supportive of it, 100%.
Yeah. Now, my funnily enough, my main draw to go to the con would only be to meet some of the friends that I've made within the community. Like that's the main draw. Like the authors are there, that's fine. I can get them to sign my stuff. That's cool. But that's a side note. I'd go mainly just to talk EU with other people, like in person. That's like the main draw to something like that for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a rare opportunity because Randy Stradley is going to be there. It's a
Yeah.
rare opportunity to throw tomatoes at him for his decision to make the Brian Wood comic series. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
get that opportunity every day. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, Sean Stewart wrote my favorite novel, Yoda Dark Rendezvous. I'd love to get my hardcover signed.
Yeah.
I just hope they continue with the guests. I hope they make it as close to what an old school celebration convention would have been, you know, had the expanded universe still be around. Like that's more than anything. That's what I hope it turns out to be.
Do you know how many more guests they're considering or anything like that? Because I've heard different numbers. I've heard that they have like 2 or 3 more people booked that they haven't announced yet. Is what someone was telling me.
They say they have some in reserve, but I don't know. I don't know. They have to get the paperwork, and they seem to be kind of making sure they cross their T's, dot their I's before they announce anything. I just worry that the convention is going to have come and gone before they sell tickets, because before we know it, it's going to be September 9th and 10th, and
Yeah.
I haven't had any word on when tickets are going to be sold. So as far as guests, there's a lot of opportunities, right? Because of the location it's being held at. Um, I know John Whitman, who wrote the Galaxy of Fear series.
That would be cool.
He may or may not run a training gym in that area. He would be an easy shoe in. You wouldn't even have to pay his travel costs. I mean, I hope they reach out and organize to get as many expanded universe authors as can be. Some of the ones I'm not as excited about, like the Legacy Volume 2 co-writer. I mean, that's okay, but it's not like a big draw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
When I saw that, I was really surprised, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but it wasn't like
I've
now I've
never
got to be there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've never heard of this lady, but
Yeah.
great. I just hope they don't like bring in who's the guy that tailored uh, Aaron Alston's uh, Hawaiian shirts or something. You know, it's like very obscure connections. I don't know. I don't know. Just
Now,
very weird.
I was wondering if they'd have the guts to go and get someone like Denning or Travis, um, because obviously, kind of controversial figures in the fandom. I like Denning and I like Karen Travis's books. I can't speak on their characters, but overall, I do like their books. But then obviously, there's many people who don't. So like some people might not want to go if they announced Troy Denning would be there, or some people would want to go to have an argument with him in person, like a
Well,
certain German EU fan that I know.
yeah. I mean, I think they'd have enough fans to back them up so that anybody critical of their work. I mean, besides somebody like Brian Wood, maybe, but um, I think
Yeah,
any guest they have is going to have more fans than they have detractors. I'll just
yeah,
say that.
yeah. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how it goes because if this one's a success, Dallas has been talked about for next year. That would be more accessible for more people. I feel like, so I think that people who might be sitting back thinking about the first one might be hoping, even if they're not going, that it succeeds, so that maybe future ones could be held. And even then, one of the draws to it is if it succeeds and if they continue doing it like annually in different cities.
Mm-hmm.
Having gotten to say I was at the inaugural one would be pretty cool to be able to say, hey, I didn't miss out on the first time they ever did this. But at the same time, since it's the first con that they're doing, there's going to be hiccups because it's the first one. What's going to happen if Sean Stewart cancels last minute or something
Right.
like that?
Right.
They've not they've
I don't
not
even want to
announced.
think of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've not announced enough guests to where if like one or two cancel, like that could like if it's just the Legacy 2 writer that's going to be there and the other two cancel last minute, like, you know.
I mean, I don't want to give them ideas, but there's some real easy. ideas they could make to get people in the door. I mean, hopefully Supernatural Encounters will be out by then. If you wanted an exclusive version of Supernatural Encounters, you could get the convention version, and that would get people in the door. You know, I hope they don't do that in case I don't go. For me, it's not the most opportune time of the year. It's like the worst possible time of the year for me, but I guess it's Labor Day weekend, so I guess they figure, you know, people might have an extra day off, they can do the travel. It would be very hard for me to go. I wish I could, but I don't know. I'll make that decision when the time arrives.
And that kind of ties us back into collecting Supernatural Encounters. You know, do you have a contributor copies on the way? I got the hardcover and the paperback. I feel like some people who ordered extra copies might be trying to sell those on eBay and make some money because, like, well, actually, I have two paperbacks and a hardcover because, well, my brother's gonna take one copy because we got an anagram of his name put in the book, so he was like, "Oh, I enjoy having that. That's cool."
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be able to sell my brother's copy probably on eBay, but it's cool for collecting. But then this Legends Con exclusive Supernatural Encounters copy that like makes me both excited and frustrated.
Forget I said that. That's not happening. Like I said, that was an idea I threw out there. I hope they don't, you know, I hope they don't use, but it would be a good idea to get people in the door. But I'm making that up. So that's not true.
I talked to Joe Bongiorno about that actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
He thinks it's going to happen.
Oh, he thinks it's going to happen, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I just independently thought that up. I didn't talk to anybody about that.
Okay, well, because I've heard things from multiple people that it might happen, and if it does, like, I'm gonna have to be messaging someone who's going and say, "Can you get an extra copy for me?" And will they print enough? There could be extra copies. How limited will the circulation be? Because for collecting, like a Legends Con exclusive copy of Supernatural Encounters could be like really hard to come by. That could be.
I mean, nothing is going to prevent fans from printing their own versions once they have the files, right?
Yeah.
So as I understand, he's going to release the text version and the cover art, and I don't know if there's going to be internal drawings. I guess there will be. But I'm sure fans will get scans of that, even if that's not released on the website. So I have no doubt that you'll be able to make your own if it's not the official version. Do you want the Legends Con exclusive? Boy, I sure would, but
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you consider that a true collectible. I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting for sure if it does occur. Like if I was going to Legends Con, like would they limit how many copies you could get so that everyone could get a copy? Would you get multiples so that you could sell a couple on eBay? Would those be able to be sold? I mean, it's a pretty niche community and it's a pretty niche project, Supernatural Encounters. How valuable, would that inevitably be? And talking with Joe, you will be able to get Lulu's and stuff. And he told me that he'd expect that you'd have to separate it into 3 volumes so that you'd almost have a trilogy to put on your bookshelves if you made it mass market paperback size. So he said, like mass market paperback, it would have to be split into 3 volumes.
Well, it's going to be over 1,100 pages plus the artwork, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just by the page count, yes, that's going to be an incredibly big book that you wouldn't be able to just do in one paperback. But you could do 3 of them. I mean, if people are going to spend the money, I mean, it's not exactly cheap to even get the original from Joe. So printing a couple Lulu copies, I don't think would break the bank comparatively. I don't know how popular something like that would be because to tell you the truth, I don't know how many people are going to attend Legends Con. My guess is it's going to be less than 200, but I could be wrong. I hope I'm proving wrong. I hope it's a tremendous success. We just don't know. Like, it's too early to tell this stuff.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be interesting for collecting and stuff like that. And if that has any collecting Supernatural Encounters to me is going to be crazier than like Heart of the Jedi or Lightsider. It's going to be very interesting to see.
I don't think it's I don't think the hype is going to match the Heart of the Jedi.
No.
Like I don't think it's gonna reach top sales on Amazon or anything like that, or reach like channels like Eckhart's Ladder or
Yeah.
that. It's not going to be that big, but it's going to be big as far as like hardcore fans that really care about the obscure things and all these connections that it's going to make. It's going to be enjoyable. I equate it to people have called it the Silmarillion of Star Wars. I've equated it to the newer version or the updated version of the illustrated Star Wars universe, right? The Kevin J. Anderson
Right.
one with the Uncle
Yeah.
Hool.
Yeah.
This is going to be an updated version, in 20, considering everything up until 2014. Sometimes you could even say some of the new canon, but considering everything in the expanded universe. So I think it's going to be great. I can't wait.
I think it's going to be fantastic. With a little asterisk of concern regarding Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Andor.
I wouldn't let that stress you out. Put it that way. It's not going to be that big a deal. It's not going to be that big a deal.
That's what I keep trying to tell people. We'll see how it goes.
And if you want a taste of it, you could actually read the 2018 version. You can read that now.
Version. It's like 300 pages. I read that a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Most of it went over my head, so I'm really excited to reread it because I hadn't read a lot of the EU at the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things you have to take notes along the way. It's not an easy read. It's not one that you can just read during your lunch break. You need to take notes, put sticky tabs in the pages, all that stuff. So
and Wikipedia is wrong in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of helpful. So I joked to Joe Bongiorno, I'll have Wikipedia on my phone in one hand, Supernatural Encounters in the other, as I go through the book, and he told me that might actually be a good idea.
Yeah.
So
with the Wikipedia, I was on Matt's More Civilized Age. They said they're going to sue us for defamation or something because we talk bad about Wikipedia.
Yeah,
that was hilarious. But yeah,
I mean,
I hope that
it can be helpful for some stuff, but it aggravates me more and more. It's not how it used to be.
Yeah, Wikipedia is trash. I have no reservations saying that, and I hope they're at Legends Con, right? I hope they have a table right next to Joe Bonjour. That would be amazing.
Oh man, because of course they have the absolutely horrible policy of not including Supernatural Encounters information on Wikipedia.
Oh yeah,
But before we go, you had something that you wanted to do.
Yes, I have to end this soon, but I wanted to do a pack opening. So this is an open pack, just so we're aware of what you would find in a Dagobah booster pack, circa 1997, right? I don't know how this is going to show up on webcam. Can we focus? So you get some effects. These are like rules modifiers cards. You get can't even read this on screen. Oh, that's bad. Maybe we'll do this when I have a better webcam. But you get some creatures, right? You get a Minoc. You get an Imperial officer, Commander Rendai, who I think appears in the Thrawn trilogy, by the way. I think he's one of like the Judicator commanders or something. You get proton bombs. Anyway, you get to the rare of the pack. It's the last card. It's the IG-88's pulse cannon. So I'm going to do a true opening, and we're going to hope to get a Son of Skywalker or a Yoda. So I have a couple of packs here, if I can find them.
Is it correct that it's somewhat devalues the pack to open it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is like burning. This is setting money on fire, right? So this pack is worth probably $25.
Could potentially one card in it, depending on rarity, be more valuable than the pack? No.
So like the most valuable card in here is maybe $12, maybe a Yoda or a Luke Skywalker. Anyway, this pack is sealed. I didn't mess with it at all. So we're going to open it. We're going to hope for a Son of Skywalker or Yoda. You can get the bounty hunters. You can get the bounty hunter weapons. So Zuckuss, Forloom, what was it? IG-88 and Bosk. and their starships. Like those are the big named rares, right? So I'm opening it for see. Okay, so the last card's going to be the rare. This isn't going to focus. This is so bad, but so we got take evasive action. We got there is no try, an effect, dark side. We have another Minoc. This one's a dark side one. We have anger, fear, aggression, a light side effect. Moving to attack position. That's a playable card. Control. So alter sense control. That was like the rock, paper, scissors effect modifier. So good to have a control. We have a light side control. It's not going to focus, but we have, what is that? A Jedi's Strength. So this is a force test number 2. And then the rare, I think that's the rare. Yes, Reflection. So that's a pretty lousy rare, but light side effect. So that pack wasn't very good, but hey, we opened it live. Now you have a CCG
really cool.
pack opening on your channel. So
yeah, thank you for doing that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And each card has a little sentence or two, like about the object of it. Like on IG-88's blaster, or whoever's blaster there was, what information would it show, or would it give you about that blaster?
So it's IG-88's pulse cannon. It says IG-88's personal favorite for mass destruction. Rapid fire fusion plasma bursts are extremely effective against multiple targets. Not widely used due to incidental damage. So I guess because he's a droid, he can fire this. I kind of remember it in Shadows of the Empire, where I don't think well, I guess you do fight against IG-88 in the junkyard, but there's like other bosses, other droid bosses that have this like pulse cannon, and it just fires these bursts everywhere. So you may get hit with it yourself if you're not a droid, but I guess he can take some damage. So pretty good stuff.
That's really cool that the card notes that, and that you're noting cohesiveness to Shadows of the Empire there. That's cool. Very cool. The cards are something that I'd love to get into.
We can
so much EU.
We can talk more about that anytime. I'd be glad to come on and talk about that.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have to do something similar to this again. It was amazing talking with you for this time, and definitely would love to do it again. And for all of you watching, you've made it to the end of us talking about collecting. Make sure to check out Scott Johnson's channel. It will be linked below. He started doing some videos on there. One of them's quite humorous, and then he's showed some book stands as well. So far is what I've recalled that I've seen so far. It's great stuff. I'm sure he'll have some more stuff to talk about on there, and maybe even a collection tour someday. Like,
maybe
I'd love to see it. That would be really cool.
Maybe I just have to figure out how to do it. Most of my videos weren't really made for the wider audience. I have some unlisted videos that are just kind of inside jokes, kind of the more humorous type. But I did do one that I showed off the book displays. People seem to like that, so maybe I'll do more kind of videos like that in the future.
Yeah, and there's so many things we didn't dive into. There's so many different directions a topic like this could have taken. For example, maybe next time we'll talk about how you store your books to keep them in good condition and stuff like that. Like there's so many places we could have taken it, but thanks for coming on and talking about what we did. It was a lot of fun.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. So go check out Scott Johnson's channel, and thank you for watching. And we hope that you were able to figure out and traverse your collecting for Star Wars, and that anything we said here was helpful to further your endeavors of collecting the EU.